Okay, welcome to another video. So just a few days ago now, Solus released an update to their Fortitude series of distributions, which brings us up to version 4.3. So I thought what we could do today is take a look at two of their desktop versions. Now they have four on offer, which are their flagship of Budgie and GNOME, Plasma and Mate. Now as Budgie is quite tightly integrated with the GNOME stack, I think we'll go ahead and check out Budgie and GNOME, and the GNOME version is now GNOME 40. Now before we jump straight into it, we'll have a quick look at the release notes and then we'll get these installed. So this release delivers new desktop environment updates, software stacks and hardware enablement. Now shared across all of the different versions are Firefox version 89.0.2, LibreOffice version 71.4.2 and in Thunderbird version 78.11.0. Now the two versions that we're looking at today of Budgie and GNOME are both going to be using Rhythmbox for audio playback and then GNOME MPV for videos. Now this release of Solus ships with the kernel version 5.13.1, which brings with it support for a broader range of hardware such as, and then it goes on to list quite a few things there, but we can see we've got the newer AMD graphics cards and we've also got Sony PS5 controller support. Now I will leave a link to this in the description below for those of you who want to read a little bit more. Mesa has been updated to 21.1.3 and BlueZ has been updated to version 5.60, which will improve Bluetooth support. Now we are going to be installing it on the laptop so we can test a few little different devices with Bluetooth and make sure we get no drops and things like that. Now moving on to the desktop environments, we have Budgie, which is going to be using version 10.5.3. So this features GNOME 40 stack support alongside all of the fixes and quality of life improvements listed below. And there is quite a lot, so there's bug fixes, cleanups and quality of life improvements. And one of them I do want to check out is actually the spacing in the system tray or the status applet, which is right here now. So we should be able to make it look a bit nicer in our panel at the bottom. And then next up we have GNOME. So Solus 4.3 GNOME edition ships with the latest GNOME 40 series release, which is 40.2. And then it goes on to list all of the highlights that made it into that version of GNOME. Now I do believe that Solus doesn't use Wayland, it's using X11 by default, so you aren't going to have the new fancy sort of three finger swipe gestures with one-to-one motion tracking, but I have noticed this here: improved mouse gestures for switching workspaces using Super and Alt within your scroll wheel, but I'm going to imagine it also works with your touchpad, so we'll see how fluid that is when we're using the touchpad to get kind of like a pseudo sort of touchpad gesture. Now there are GNOME extensions that you can get for X11 that will kind of mimic the touchpad gestures that you get with Wayland anyway. Then we have some default changes. So Solus 4.3's GNOME edition ships with the Materia Dark instead of Plateau Noir as the default GTK theme. This enables us to provide support for GNOME Shell 40 and GTK4 while providing our users a similar look and feel to Plateau. Alongside this default change, Solus 4.3 GNOME edition continues to ship the Impatience and Tray icons reloaded, which are GNOME extensions. So Impatience is a very good one, which will speed up the animations in the GNOME shell, and then Tray icons will give you back your kind of system tray icons, but we'll check all that out once we're installed and at our desktops. Now as far as the size for the ISOs for these desktops, GNOME is actually the largest across all of their versions, closely followed by Plasma. So GNOME is 2.1 GB and Budgie is 1.9. So I think what we'll do, we'll start off with Budgie, we'll show the installation for that, but we'll only show the installation once because it will be the same across the different desktop environments. So with that being said, let's jump into the live environment for Budgie. And here we are in our live environment for Budgie, looking very nice with the new wallpaper, but we'll check out how the desktop's all set up once we are fully installed. So first up, we'll load up our installer and then we'll get this installed natively, but if you'd like to skip the installation part of this video, there'll be a timestamp below which will take you to both desktops. So we'll split it up. You'll have a timestamp for GNOME and Budgie respectively. Okay, so first up we need to choose our language. Now unfortunately for me, they don't have English United Kingdom on the main page, so we'll press these three little dots and then I'll show you all of the other available languages, and we'll go down until we hit English United Kingdom, which is right about there, and then we can press next. So the next few questions relate to your location, so we can speed things up by enabling automatic location finding, which we will do to save us a little bit of time. So it's found our location of Europe, London, and it's got our correct keyboard layout of English, UK. And then we have a box just beneath that to test out our keyboard layout and make sure it's all working before we go to the next step, which is our time zone. And again, it's already got us for London, so we can move forward now. And here's where we're going to choose where to install. So we've got two different options. The first one is the automatic partitioning, to let the Solus installer create the partitions for us. Or if we wanted to manually assign the mount points and all of that good stuff, we could do it manually as well. Now I'm going to do it automatically. Now Solus does create you a swap partition as well, and it will usually be around about 4 GB on this kind of setup. So let's press next. Now I'm not going to worry about LVM or encrypting the drive, so let's press next. And now we can choose to name our computer, and it will create a new ESP on the drive that we are installing on. So we'll keep it super simple and just call it Budgie Boy, like so. And then we'll go to the next screen, which is going to be our user account. Now, if I remember from the last time I checked out Solus, you can add more than one account here, I do believe. So as we go through the steps here and then create our password and user account, we can go add now. And then we also have another add button here as well, which is pretty cool to have that built into the installer. So let's press next once more. And now we've got a little summary. And as you can see here, for the partitions, it's going to create us 3 with a GPT partition table. So we've got one for our EFI. We then have one partition for our swap of 4 GB, like I thought. And then we have our main partition, which is going to be using ext4 as the file system. So I'm going to pause the video here and come back once it's finished. And there we are. So our installation is complete, super easy, and it took no time at all, just about 2 or 3 minutes on my machine. So let's reboot and check out our freshly installed Budgie desktop. So we've just started up and it's taken us straight to our login screen. So let's go ahead and type in our password to get into the desktop. And here we are. So I am on the laptop today and we're not actually connected to Ethernet for a change. So let's go ahead and get our Wi-Fi and make sure it's all working and it has found our access point, which it has. Type in our password and we are connected, and we've got a nice little notification there that's popped up in the right hand side of the screen. So let's go ahead and launch their software center, which is where you're going to be managing all of your new software application installs. Or of course you can use EOPKG in the terminal, and we'll do a few things with that in just a moment as well. So first up, let's go straight over to the updates page. Now it says we're up to date, and let's just check once more to make sure it's all good. And it's now discombobulating the update matrix, and we are good to go. So I think what we'll do first, we'll open up the About section, which is going to be using the GNOME Control Center for your settings. So typing in About, we'll jump straight to the About part of GNOME settings. So if we scroll down, as we can see, we are indeed using Solus 4.3 Fortitude. And there we can see the GNOME sort of stack underpinning things, which is version 40.2.0. And we will be checking out GNOME itself after this video, after this desktop as well. So windowing system, like I thought, it does use X11, and I'm pretty much sure that's the same across all of their desktops. At least I know it is for their GNOME version as well. Now I think what we'll do to start off with, for those of you that are not super familiar with the Budgie desktop, it was made by Solus, and it's a very nice desktop. It's kind of better version of Cinnamon almost, so it behaves in a quite a similar way. You have your single panel at the bottom, but there's a lot you can do with your paneling in the Budgie desktop settings and kind of set up your desktop in any way that you do like. I tend to quite like to download a dock for this, kind of like the way the Ubuntu Budgie does it. Or you can use something like Plank and then have a panel at the top with a global menu and all sorts of things that you can do. So the way ours is set up, we have our application launcher on the left hand side with our categories to the left, and then the main applications to the right with a search bar at the top. And we'll check out the applications in just a moment. There shouldn't really be any differences application wise from this and their GNOME version. Now we then have our kind of like our task list, and if we right click you can see we have a few more options here. So we have the favorite, we have launch new instance, and then we can also close all windows. Now at the very right hand side we have our Raven trigger, which has some applets as well as our notifications. Very cool. Now we have our clock, so we have the calendar, which I do believe is just going to be using GNOME calendar. It is indeed. And now we can also go into our preferences and time and date settings. Now we have Bluetooth here, but we're going to test out Bluetooth when we're in the GNOME version. It should be using the same stuff for Bluetooth, so it shouldn't really matter too much on what desktop environment you are using. I'll confirm that towards the end of the video though. We then have our volume slider, and we have a nice little mute button here, and then we can jump straight into it with the settings as well. Now you'll notice it says dummy output. It always says that on this laptop on a fresh install. Very easy to fix, so I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. We'll fix that when we do the GNOME one, and we'll test out some Bluetooth headsets and things like that. We then have our battery, and we can show battery percentage as well right next to it, so we can see we're currently on 52%. And then we can click power settings to go straight into the power settings, and again it's all going to be using the GNOME Control Center. And then we have our little notification bell as well. So that's again going to open your little trigger to the right, but go straight into notifications. And then we have our networks, which you've already seen when we're connected to our Wi-Fi. Now we do have window snapping. I can't remember if it's a 4-way or just a 2-way. Let's have a look. I think it might just be a 2-way split. It does appear to be. I don't think we can get it in the corners. So by default, it's going to be a 2-way snap kind of procedure, but that's not too much to worry about. So as far as your actual applications go, in accessories, we have just the files and the text editor, and I think the files application it's going to be using is Nautilus. It does appear to be, so if we just go into help and about, we can just confirm that it is indeed Nautilus or files, and there we can see the version of 40.2. Perfect. I do quite like this theming as well. I like a nice dark theme. We'll go into the themes in just a moment. So that was in accessories, and then we also have our text editor, which is going to be Gedit, and that's going to be the same across their GNOME version as well. And then what have we got in graphics? So in graphics, we just have the two applications here of the image viewer and then LibreOffice, which we know is version 7.1.4.2. So we have the draw version, the draw application here on the graphics. And now in internet, we have Firefox as our default web browser, HexChat, and then we have Thunderbird for our default email client. It'll probably work quite well on Budgie actually, although I do quite like using Evolution on these kind of desktops, especially on GNOME. So I'd probably switch over Thunderbird on GNOME to Evolution, but I think on Budgie it'll fit in quite nicely anyway. And of course it will all work with your online accounts, which this does have, because like I said, it's going to be using a lot of the stuff from GNOME. So that's internet. I don't think there's anything else there we need to take a look at. And now in Office, here we have the full LibreOffice suite now, and then we also have our GNOME calendar. So while we're here, let's just do the quick spell checking test to make sure it's all set up with our dictionary out of the box. As a lot of distributions, as we found out as we've gone through this channel, don't always have dictionary support up and running on a fresh install, but this one does. And as you can see, we've got the squiggly line letting us know that we've spelt something wrong, and that automatic spell checking is working. And if we just open this up, we can make sure we've got the right locale there of ENGB. So let's close that one off and keep it moving. So that's pretty much everything in Office. Now in Other, we just have the onboard settings, which is going to be for your on-screen keyboard. We then have print settings, and in settings, which is again just going to go straight to the GNOME Control Center, which has all of your settings here to the side. So of course you have your online accounts as well for things like Nextcloud, Microsoft Exchange, Google, and all of that good stuff. Now, is there anything else in Other? Nope, so that's everything. So for sound and video, we have GNOME MPV for video playback, which are pretty much everything you want to throw at it. Of course, you can go ahead and install a VLC or something similar. We didn't have the Rhythmbox music player, which personally isn't my favourite, but it does get the job done, and you can manage your library quite easily with Rhythmbox. I just prefer alternatives. Now that's pretty much everything in sound and video. So for system settings, so here you're mainly going to be getting the sort of entries in GNOME settings. So for example, opening up background will take you straight to the background section in GNOME settings, and we are currently using the new default wallpaper for Budgie, and there is quite a nice little selection of other wallpapers included. Now, is there anything else in settings that we might want to take a look at? We of course have our Bluetooth settings. Again, it's always going to be opening up in the GNOME Control Center. So Bluetooth is working. Let's find a TV that we've got here. And now if we go back into settings, let's see if there's anything else here that we might want to check out. But I think we're all good to go. We'll spend a bit of time on the software center in just a moment. Now for system tools, here's one of my favorite things about Budgie altogether is the Budgie desktop settings. So the reason why I probably prefer Budgie over sort of Cinnamon, you can kind of achieve the same sort of desktop paradigm, but everything in Budgie, for at least the desktop, is all pretty much in one place, in one application, one window for you to set it up however you like, and that is of course your Budgie desktop settings. So theming wise, we can see that we are using the Platter Noir, and we also have the other variations of Platter. So we have Platter Compact, Lumine, and all of that good stuff. And the icon theming we are using is Papyrus, and I think that's also going to be the same on the GNOME edition. And then we have just the Papyrus Dark and the Papyrus Light. Now, as far as a light theme, if we just go into the platter theme, we should have a bit more of a lighter theme. There we go. So that's what your light theme is going to look like as well. So still pretty nice and clean. But like I said, I'm a massive fan of the dark theme, so we're going to leave it on Plateau Noir as we keep it moving. So we can also change the notification position, so set the location for notification pop-ups. By default it's at the top right, which is probably where I'd leave it, but we can also do top left and then bottom left or right. And then we have a toggle here for animation, so we can control whether windows and controls use animations. Now in desktop, we've got all of the other settings here for things like desktop icons and active mounts, your home directory and all of that good stuff. And then we can change the number of virtual desktops, and Budgie does it on a left kind of sort of right sort of fashion, the same way as GNOME 40 now does. So it's no longer using the horizontal workspaces, and Budgie is very much the same. So I do believe with Control Alt and then left and right, you can see that we can switch between the different desktops. And there are little sort of Budgie desktop applets you can get for have it in your panel, so you know which one you are currently on. And you might have noticed we had a nice little sort of slide animation of the applications as we sort of traverse through different desktops. Very nice and smooth. Now, is there anything else here I might want to see? And we can of course change the icon size as well. And while we're here, a right click on your desktop will also take you straight to the Budgie desktop settings or the standard system settings as well. Font wise, we are using Clear Sans Bold for the Windows titles, documents and Noto Sans Regular, as well as the interface, and then we have Hack Regular for the monospace. We then have our Raven trigger. So set which side of the screen Raven will open on. If set to automatic, Raven will open where its parent panel is. So we can also set it manually to left or right. So we're currently on right. So if we set it to the left, you can have a quick look, and there we go. So it will now always pop up from the left when you're using the trigger or the keyboard shortcut. I quite like it on the right though. And then we have a few more settings here as well, such as allow raising the volume above 100%. And now we have a whole load more options here for your windows, so you can enable focus change mouth, automatic tiling, etc, etc. So it does say here windows will automatically tile when dragged at the top of the screen or the far corners. So if you drag it to the very top, it's going to maximize that application's window. And if you take it to the corner, it does just appear that it's just going to do a side-by-side sort of tile. I can't see that it is doing the four-way split, but we could be wrong. Now, so this is sort of the paneling system. So we've got the one panel at the moment, which is our bottom panel. And you'll notice we have all of these applets here, and we can also add more. And then we can also go into the settings and change the position, so we can have top, bottom, left, right. And if you didn't want to actually download a dock like Plank, you could even just create a nice little another sort of panel and use it in dock mode, and then it will shrink things down into a kind of like a dock. So as you can see here, we have dock mode. So if we do that, we've now kind of just got a little dock as well as our sort of system tray here and our applications. If you wanted sort of a panel and a dock kind of thing, what I'd probably suggest is making another empty panel at the top with your system tray in it, application launcher, and then just having your sort of running applications there as well, or your favorited or pinned apps. So very cool that it's all built into the Budgie desktop. Now if we go back into our bottom panel like so, into the applets, we can see that we can move all of these things kind of around to any sort of position that we like. So we could even center our application sort of icon task list, like all of the cool kids seem to be doing right now, and we can move it to any other position that we like. Now one thing that I do want to check while we're here, which I did see in the release notes, was the status indicator, which is all of this bad boy stuff right here. So we're currently on 6 for the icon spacing. So as you see, as we go up, it's now going to sort of let you manually create the spacing that you want around your status sort of indicator, which does make things a lot nicer to get a sort of nice uniform look across the whole of your panel. So very cool. And now for auto start, let's see what we've got. So we don't appear to have anything, at least in the Budgie desktop settings. Now before I show you how the sort of software center works, I do want to quickly open up a terminal. So it's not opening up by default. So if we go back into our application launcher, now we did miss a couple of things here, but what we can do is we can see that we do have GNOME disks, and I do believe we also have gparted installed out of the box as well, which is a more fully featured kind of application to manage your partitions, file systems, and all of that good stuff. But while we're here, we're going to open up our terminal because it doesn't appear that we have a keyboard shortcut for it enabled out of the box. So we're just going to type in terminal, and it does use the GNOME terminal, I do believe, so it's going to be the same across this and their GNOME version. And just so we are not talking nonsense, we can double check that we are using the GNOME terminal version 3.40.2 for GNOME 40. Now their package manager is called EOPKG, and they also do have Flatpak and Snap support out of the box. So if you type in Flatpak list, you can see that we have got no Flatpaks currently installed, and if we do the same for Snap, you can see that we also have Snap installed but no Snap apps installed. So what we can do is clear all of that off, and we can make this a little bit larger so we can see what's going on, and we can check out their package manager, which is called EOPKG, and then we can just type in help, and you can see all of the options that you can do with your package manager. A lot of it will be second nature for anyone that's used a package manager. So install, it's all going to be the same kind of commands, but anything that is different, you can go ahead and read this here. And I like that it gives you the shorthand of all of the sort of commands in brackets next to it. So for example, for install, we just type in EOPKG IT and then the applications or packages, but of course we'd be using sudo. So for example, we're going to want to see if we've got htop installed out of the box. We don't, so that's one we want to go ahead and get. So we're going to type in sudo EOPKG htop, and then we also want to go ahead and grab a neofetch like so. Now if we just hit enter, although we forgot to type in IT, so that IT is the shorthand for install, so that's sudo EOPKG IT htop neofetch, and that will do the exact same thing as typing in EOPKG install htop neofetch. So if we hit enter, it will ask you for your sudo password, and there we go. So following packages will be installed, and then we've got the total size of 1.56 MB, and we can see there it's going to be installing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 packages. So when we open up neofetch to see how many packages are installed by default, we'll just take away 5, and then we know exactly how many packages this can be installed with out of the box. So all we need to do now is press Y, and that's going to go ahead and grab all of those packages for us, and it shouldn't take us too long, and then we should be good to go. So let's clear that off and also type in neofetch. And then we can see that we have only actually got just over 690 packages installed out of the box. That's really quite light. I'd be interested to see how that does compare to their GNOME version. So I'm going to imagine RAM usage should be pretty low on a fresh startup. So I think that's what we're going to go ahead and check out now. And of course your default shell is bash version 5.1.8. So we're going to do a quick reboot, check out the RAM, and then we'll play around with the software center. And then I think we'll jump into the GNOME 40 version and take a look around there as well. RAM usage really isn't too bad whatsoever, so it's under 700 MB at around about 682. So I do like the fact that Solus isn't a very bloated out distribution, and it kind of only really includes a lot of the stuff that a new user would need to get up and running before they go ahead and add their own applications, which is exactly what we're going to do now. So let's close that off and close the terminal. And now we're going to launch their software center. So you see we have all of these categories here, and then inside these categories we have additional categories. So desktop software and theming, gaming on Solus, and it does have Steam in the repos, and I've got a video of me playing some games on Solus, and it's always very nice and smooth. I think it might have been the video before this one, if you want to check that out as well. Multimedia and graphics, internet software, office software, programming languages and tools, security software, and then system software. Now if we jump straight into desktop software and theming, you can see we've got all of these different sections depending on what kind of desktop environment you might be using. And of course we have one here for the Budgie desktop, and here we can get all of the other additional applets that are currently available inside the repo, and you really can pretty up your sort of Budgie desktop panel to make it really look nice and have a lot of useful information showing on your screen. Now we're going to use this to install an application to show you how that works. So we've got the search button here, so we can just type in something like let's go for GIMP, and there we go. So it's got version 2.10.24 in its repository. So let's go ahead and install that now, and now it's going to grab all of the dependencies, so we can press install, and after a password that's going to go ahead and install the application plus everything it requires to work, and you're good to go. So I'll pause the video here and then we'll come back once that's installed. And there we go. So GIMP has been installed nice and easy. So we can go ahead and jump into our application launcher. And there is GIMP with our nice little icon there, all good to go. Now there is also one more change that's been made into the Budgie desktop settings. So if we go right over to the desktop settings here, we now have the pause notification when windows are in full screen, which prevents notifications from appearing when a window is in full screen and unpauses when leaving full screen. So that's something very handy when you're trying to focus on something and you don't want any distractions. You can then pause your notifications. Now I think what we'll do is we'll get GNOME installed and we'll see how their GNOME implementation is working on Budgie, on Solus. And like I said, I've got previous videos on Solus Budgie, so if you want to go a bit more into it and check out gaming and things like that, you can go ahead and do that. But for now, let's wrap it up with the Budgie desktop and jump over to GNOME. And here we are now in their GNOME version. So the installation exactly as the same before. There was no real difference and it took pretty much the same length of time. So what we will check though is how many packages this one has installed compared to their Budgie version, and we'll also compare the RAM usage on a fresh startup. But what I mainly want to do with their GNOME version is kind of see how they've implemented the GNOME desktop here now that we've got GNOME 40 in the flesh. And of course it's split opinions, but I was one of the people that really did like the new way it's going to be managing your workspaces and your overview and all of that good stuff. Now we're currently using the mouse to change the workspaces. There are of course keyboard shortcuts, and we have our dash or favorites at the bottom here, search bar at the top, and of course we can always click that. Or we do have a hot corner enabled out of the box as well for those of you who like a hot corner. Now as far as Bluetooth, we'll test that out towards the end. I'm going to spend a good 20-30 minutes just playing around with a few devices and seeing if we get any drops. And then we also have another GNOME extension here, which is going to be for your removable drives. And then of course we have our notifications centered. Now applications wise, it's not going to really be anything different. So there might be the odd thing here and there from their flagship Budgie version, but as you can see, for the most part, it's all going to be pretty much familiar. We have the LibreOffice suite, Thunderbird, Firefox, etc. Now the things that you will notice that are different are the very GNOME specific stuff like extensions and tweaks. And we'll spend a bit of time in their extensions in a moment, because I want to see, as well as impatience and the tray icons, what else I have enabled out of the box to sort of get this implementation of GNOME. It looks quite stock, but I can already see a few differences. So when you want to go into your applications view, you can just use a left super and hold A, and that'll take you straight to it. Or there's also another little shortcut. If you very quickly double tap your left super key, that will also take you into your applications overview of your workspaces to the top. Now of course you can add all the sort of folders that you might want and move them all around and name them and all of that good stuff in your overview here. But what I'm mainly intrigued on checking out is going straight into their extensions package and seeing what extensions we do have enabled out of the box. So it's not enabled, but we have the application menu. So for those of you that don't always like going into these kind of views or don't always use a search, obviously it's quite a keyboard driven desktop, so you can get away of just hitting super, typing an application and hitting enter. But if you'd like to have an application menu, they have the GNOME extension ready to go. So if we enable that, it's going to give you a little application sort of tag right here, and it's a very simple application menu, just your categories to your left, and then of course your applications to the right. Very simple stuff, just sort of a plain dark window there depending on your theming. So I'm going to disable that. We then also have auto move windows, and then we have impatience, which we saw in the release notes is enabled out of the box. Now as you can see, it's very fluid, all of these animations that we're currently using, very fast and snappy, and that is all to do with this extension here. It's one that I use on my own sort of GNOME desktops, and if we go into the settings for it itself, you can notice we can change the scaling of the speed. So we're currently on 0.5, and that's just going to be every time you sort of navigate and go into something that uses animations for your GNOME shell, it will then speed things up a whole lot. So if you see, when we disable it, you'll see that things take a lot more of a slow, smooth animation. But I do feel like when you've got impatience actually enabled, it just feels faster and snappier to get to what you want to go to quickly without waiting for the animation to transition. So I'm very much a big fan of impatience. We then have launch new instance. We have native window placement, onboard indicator. We've got a little warning there. Places status indicator, but that is not enabled. We have a removable drive, which is this bad boy right here, and there is our USB ISO for the GNOME version. We then have the screenshot window slider, so let's just expand that and see what we've got here. So resize windows for GNOME software screenshots. Okay, and then we have tray icons reloaded, and what that basically is for those of you that are quite used to a system tray for when you've got applications running in the background, this will bring that to GNOME. So tray icons reloaded is a GNOME shell extension which bring back tray icons So think like applications that like Discord, for example, that will run in the background. We then have user themes, and we'll go into the themes in just a moment. Window list, window navigator, and workspace indicator. So quite a few there, but only a couple enabled out of the box. So for the most part, you are going to get quite a stock feeling GNOME experience, apart from, of course, the theming and then just the speed of your animations, etc. And you have your top icons. Now, if we go into the Launch Software Center, I just want to see if we've got some applications installed out of the box for when we want to install our own sort of GNOME extension. So if we go into the Software Center once more, so Chrome, GNOME, Shell, do we have it installed? We don't. So I'm going to go ahead and install this, and I'm going to grab a few extensions just to sort of pretty up my desktop a bit and kind of get it looking like what we had Budgie looking like beforehand. And then we'll test out this Bluetooth and start to wrap things up. So we've installed Chrome, GNOME, Shell. Now I'm not going to install any extensions as of yet. I've just realised we want to do a quick RAM test. So let's open up a terminal. And we're also going to grab NeoFetch, aren't we? So we have also installed the Chrome, GNOME, Shell, and whatever dependencies that has. But for now, we're going to go sudo eopkg it, the same as before, htop NeoFetch. So the same two packages. So now we can see how many packages we have installed, bearing in mind we have installed a few of our own. But again, very light on the application sort of packages and things like that. So we've only got 704, and that'll be including the ones we've installed ourselves. So I've got quite good hopes that the RAM usage for this is quite light on a fresh boot as well. So let's do that now, and then we'll grab some extensions, test Bluetooth, and start to wrap things up. And again, very decent RAM usage for a fully fledged desktop distribution using GNOME 40 this time at just under 700 once more at around about 695 MB. So that's very impressive, and it all starts up very nice and quickly on Solus. And I have daily driven Solus before for quite a little while actually, and I never really ran into any issues. Definitely a distribution I can recommend. So I'm going to pause the video here. I'm going to grab some extensions, and I'm also going to add some Bluetooth devices, play around with them for 20 or so minutes, come back and let you know how that went. And then I'm going to test out a couple more things, and then we'll wrap things up. Right, so I've just been testing out the Bluetooth for a little while on a couple of different devices. The first one being this mouse, which is notoriously rubbish, regardless of what distribution I am using. But I'm happy to say that while I've been using Solus 4.3, it's been absolutely perfect. A lot of the times on other distros that I've used in the past, it would fail to connect and just be very patchy and would drop out a lot. However, on here, been fluid the whole time that I've been using it, so that is a very nice indeed. And the same can be said for the Philips headset right there. All of the Bluetooth controls that I use were working absolutely fine, and again I was getting no drops of connection. So as you might have noticed, our desktop is looking ever so slightly different from when we stopped recording to test out the Bluetooth. All we've done there is downloaded the Dash to Panel extension, and we've set it up in a way to kind of mirror the workflow that we had going on Budgie. So we can see we have the nice little panel here. Applications are all centered, and then we have the little button here for show applications, which is going to take us straight to our overview for GNOME in the applications grid. Now, I did mention at the beginning when we was going through the release notes, they're using X11 and not Wayland, so you don't have the full sort of 3-finger swiping that Wayland does give you for your touchpad gestures. But they made a note of saying that you can use the left super and your shift key with a scroll wheel, which is what we're doing now, and that will change your workspaces. Now, that's very quick, so I'm going to imagine that has got something to do with impatience. So if we open up extensions very quickly and just disable that and then check it out once more, there we go. So that's ever so slightly slower, but it still feels very jagged, but it is going with one sort of one movement of the scroll wheel. Now what I want to do is test it out with the same kind of thing, but this time using a touchpad and seeing if we can kind of almost get some one-to-one movement with the 2 fingers. Right, so we've got the touchpad all set up on the laptop. We're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to use left super and shift, but instead of using a scroll wheel on a mouse, we're going to use 2 fingers on a touchpad and see how that works. So we're going to press left super, shift, and now we're very slowly dragging our 2 fingers across. And actually, that does feel very smooth and fluid, and it kind of is one-to-one tracking there, so we can go very quickly, or we can slowly drag it, and then it will sort of follow the traction of your fingers. So not quite as nice as the sort of full native touchpad gestures that you are going to get of a Wayland session on GNOME 40, but it does kind of work there with that little workspace switching. Now, as far as Flatpak applications go, it didn't have the FlatHub repository enabled, so we had to quickly go ahead and add that ourselves. And then after that, I was able to install Kdenlive from there without any issues at all. We don't need to restart, and it should now, of course, appear in our application launcher. And we can see it's got the nice icon theming there all ready to go. So I think that is where I'm going to wrap up with my refresh look of Solus at this time of 4.3. All in all, I am a massive fan of Solus, and it's one of those distributions that just gets better and better and better, and it kind of only includes the stuff that it really does need to get you up and running, and doesn't include a whole lot of extra fluff that you don't really need. If you've never used it, I definitely recommend giving it a go, especially the Budgie version, their flagship version. It's a very nice, clean and refined desktop experience. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, and if you've really enjoyed it, you can support me on Patreon. And of course, join the Discord. There's a link in the description below, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.